Welcome to Dan and Sarah Makers. Today I am going to show you how to make a plush pumpkin. Over the last few years I've made quite a few different types of plush pumpkins, and as you can see they're all different shapes, sizes, colors, etc. The general rule is for whatever diameter circle fabric you use to make your plush pumpkin, the diameter of the finished pumpkin will be about 1/3 the diameter of your starting fabric dimension. Here are the steps that I will go through to complete a plush pumpkin. The first step is to find a cool stem, which I have here. So with this stem, I'm going to secure a chunk of 1/4 inch plywood to the base of it by gluing it and then stapling it. After that, I'll show you how to make the actual fabric portion, and then there will be a collaboration video with RustiKate on how you could possibly decorate your pumpkin in the end. Let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to slice this so that it's flat so I can add a piece of wood to the back of it to support it when I enclose the pumpkin around the stem.
As a side note, if you don't feel like plush pumpkins are a good enough excuse to buy a scroll saw, you could also buy a coping saw and do almost the same thing almost as fast. Now back to the video.
The next thing I'm going to do is just trace a general outline about 1/2 inch all the way around the base of the pumpkin. So there's the piece that I'm going to cut out about. It doesn't have to be exact. Unfortunately, the little curly Q that was making this so cool came off, so I'm going to super glue it back on. Shh, don't tell anybody. Okay, so now I need to put some glue here. I'm just going to use some Tight Bond wood glue. Hold it there for a minute till it kind of sets a little bit, and then I'm going to staple it. Yeah. Alright, so now I'm going to attach the piece of 1/4 inch plywood with some micro nails. Alright, so these micro nails, they're so nice, you can hardly see them, but they really are quite small. Let me show you how small they are. Here's a piece of 1/4 inch plywood, and then this is how small the micro nails are. And I have some different fabrics to show you. The first one is this 80% polyester, 20% rayon, it kind of feels like velour. It's like a velveteen, but the cool thing about it is that one direction it's kind of stretchy, and that is very helpful. If you can find fabric like this, buy it, because this is the best for making plush pumpkins. This is probably the other end of the spectrum, I would say, when it comes to trying to work with fabrics. This is burlap, and it is not stretchy. If you pull it on the bias, it'll stretch a little bit, but on grain it doesn't really stretch much at all. And it's really loosely woven, so it's gonna show whatever you put inside the plush pumpkin. So like if you put rice in there or very small beans, you might even see them popping out. So this would be a less desirable plush pumpkin, but you could still work with it. You just have to be stubborn. Cut out a sort of circle, and that's the thing about pumpkins. They aren't perfectly spherical, and so your plush pumpkin doesn't have to be perfectly spherical either. But I measured this, and it's about a 10-inch diameter circle. We're gonna call it a circle. So about, I don't know if you can see this, but I'm just using a rotary chalk marker, and I'm going to use as much of this little off-cut fabric left over as I possibly can. And then I'll gather around the edge. So there's my circle. And so now I'm just going to cut around the edge. Okay, here's my lovely circle. See how it's got some little notches in it? Doesn't matter. We're just going to put a basting stitch in this. Now, I've done this with both by hand and with a machine, and while you could do it by hand, I actually, if you have a sewing machine, I recommend doing that because you have a little bit more control over your gathers. Okay, try that. I was like, why is it? Alright, I'm going to run the edge of my fabric up against the edge of the presser foot, and I have my stitches set to 4.5 on this Husqvarna Viking, but basically you want your stitches to be about 1/8 of an inch long. So if you see this, it's about how long you want your stitches to be. So when I come up to the end, where I get close to my other stitches where I started, I'll just kind of slow down and just get as close as I can without running over the previous stitches. Give yourself plenty of thread on either side so you have something to pull on. You flip it over to the back and grab the lower threads. So these two threads from the underside of your stitches. This is, if you've never gathered fabric before, it's a little tricky, but basically you hold the thread taut and you pull the fabric away from the thread. So I'm not moving the hand that I am holding the thread with, and then I'm pulling the fabric away from the thread. And see how all those gathers just show up so pretty there? Ta-da! All right, and then you just reposition your grasp of the thread and you just keep pulling the fabric away from where you're holding the thread stationary. Pretty soon you have something that looks kind of like a bag. So we're getting almost there. You can see kind of this shape of a pumpkin emerging, I hope. Alright, so we're almost there. You want to leave a little bit of room to fill the bag that will make the pumpkin with beans or rice, is what I usually use because they're not that expensive and most people have them lying around. You could also use peas, dried peas, or dried lentils, something like that. And at craft stores, they also sell these little plastic pebbles, and you could use those kind of like what a Beanie Baby is filled with, if you wanted to. Okay, so now that these are like as gathered up as I can possibly make them, they're not going to get any more gathered. Like, that's as tight as the gathers will go. You may have to knot these threads, otherwise the gathers will kind of pop out again, but that's as tight as I can make it. And so there's only a little tiny gap here where I'm going to fill it with beans. Okay, let's do that next. I'm gonna fill this thing up with lima beans. I'd say these beans are kind of on the upper end of size that you would want. I don't think you'd want to put beans any bigger than this in here. If it was a bigger pumpkin, it'd probably be fine. But I think rice would probably make it a little smoother looking on the outside. It also depends on how stiff your fabric is. Alright, so that took about a pound of beans. So you can see how it's pretty full now. And so now we have to tie all these threads so that they don't get any looser. Pull the two long gathering threads tight again, just to make sure that they're as snug as they can be, and then put a knot in it. So that you don't keep loosening up. Not super tight, just tight enough so that this thing doesn't keep ungathering itself. And then these other two shorter ones from when you were stitching on the top, we'll just leave them there. And then we're going to put the stem on. Alright, this is really kind of the tricky part. I have some crazy glue, maximum bond here, put down some plastic for protection, and I've put a little tiny bit of glue on here. And this is kind of a trial and error thing. So you fit the stem down inside, and then you take these gathers and you fold them under as best you can. So that the gather thread line is where you're folding it. And then you lay those gathers down, the underside part, down onto the crazy glue. And you hold it there for a while. And you work your way all the way around like that. So you're rolling the gathers under, and then you're pushing those gathers onto the crazy glue. And you can see that now it's holding pretty well, but you don't want to yank on it too hard because the glue hasn't set very much. So you just keep doing this. Now, once you roll this over, you might find that you might have to relieve some of the beans. Like maybe you put too many in. And then I'm going to take a little bit of crazy glue and put it on there. Roll the gathers under and then push them onto the glue. Sometimes you might need tweezers or something. Just gonna put this back on. Just almost as good as new. So there it is in all its completeness. The velvety ones tend to collect random fuzz, so. Thanks for joining me today on Dan and Sarah Makers while I made this beautiful plush pumpkin. I hope you head on over to RustiKate and find out what she did with it after I handed it over to her with her lovely tatting abilities. Thanks for watching. I hope these videos inspire you to get out there and do something. See you later.